Welcome back to Insights at DDLynn Designs, a unique twist in the ancient art of wire. So I thought I would work in the Christmas theme, and this is just an easy beginner beaded. It can be Christmas ornament, Christmas earrings, Christmas pendant, Christmas bracelet. So you can see how cute it would be as a bracelet or hanging from your neck with a beautiful chain and a little dangle on the bottom. Or earrings, you could take one out if you didn't want them that long and just have two big beads and one little bead. So really the sky's the limit. So all we're doing is creating beads and attaching them. So I thought I'd make this a really user-friendly, fun beginning holiday tutorial. So let's get started. So I'm using 20 gauge wire and it is round. And I hope that this holds up. My little camera is kind of leaning back. And I cut myself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 3/4 of an inch of 20 gauge wire, 3 pieces. And then I cut myself 2 inches of that 20 gauge wire. And all I'm going to do is just put this on my mat. And so I can see that I've got my 2 inches. And I'm just going to put my little bead there in the middle, just to kind of give me an idea of where I want to bend. So I was looking for my felt pen. I don't know where it went. That's funny, it probably rolled on the floor. So to make things easy for yourself, you might want to mark your center. And then what you want to do is you want to make your first bend on the outside of that mark about 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters away from the mark, because you have to make room for your bead and you kind of want to center up your legs when we bend it around. So because we're going to be making this little dangle right here. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to come at my mark just about 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters away, and I'm going to bend my wire straight up. And then I'm going to put my bead in. Then I'm going to come around the other side, and I'm going to come very close to my stone, and I'm going to bend that wire back up again. So here's what you should have, like a little square hook. Bring this one up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to line my legs up, want to even them up. And I'm just going to trim the top so that they're even. And then to make my life easy, I'm just going to open up these legs. And I'm going to get myself my 6-step bell making pliers, and I'm going to use my smallest loop. And I want to make sure that the tip of that wire is down lower between the 2 barrels. And then all I'm going to do is squeeze off that tip and roll it in. I'm going to adjust my wrist and roll that all the way in. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Get that tip way down in that barrel and roll that wire in as I adjust my wrist. So there's what you should have. Then I'm going to put my pliers back in so that I can line up my loops. I'm always going to give you really good techniques and tips. And I just want to squeeze them together with my fingers at the top. Now, if you don't want your drop piece this long, then you can always just cut your loops. So here's another tip a little bit, and roll them down further. It's really up to you, what you want to see in your design. So it's all a personal preference. And I'm just going to roll that down and line them up so that they're even. So now we're going to make our beads, and we're going to attach them to each other. And on this one, I fully attached each bead to each other so that there's no possibility that they could come apart. And then I always want to make things user-friendly. So up here I used a jump ring. So if it's hard for you when you're starting out to find a way to attach them together, I'm going to show you how to do that. Then you can always use a jump ring and just pre-make all your beads. So you could put a jump ring in between each one. It's just going to make it longer. So now I'm going to find my center on this wire. And it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's about 7.5 inches long. So I'm going to find my center. And then I'm using a much bigger bead this time. So I'm going to put that down there. And it just kind of given me an idea of how far away I want to start my bend, just to make sure that I'm as center as can be. But it's not, you know, it's not so critical that it's going to cause any problems for you. So I've got my mark right here. And I'm just going to come away about 2 to 3 centimeters, and I'm going to bend that wire up. And then I'm going to get my 6-step bell making pliers. I'm going to use the number 1 again. And I'm going to wrap and start to make my first loop. So I'm always adjusting my wrist. I'm going to swing that wire over the top, and then I'm going to square that loop up. I'm going to rock my wrist down. And then I'm just going to straighten out my wire. Then I'm going to make 1 complete loop. You want to come as close to the neck as you can. These wires are so long, I need to make sure I work down lower. So you can't see, I'm way out here where the length of this wire is, but I'm going to grab at the tip of it right here, and then I'm going to swing it straight up and over. Now to square up, here's another great tip. Your loop that's coming around the neck of this wire, just put your pliers on top of the loop and underneath the starting of the loop that we're making around the leg, and just squeeze it up. So you square up that starting of your loop, meaning going around your core wire. And I'm just going to use my finger just so that I can just kind of push it around a little bit. Then I'm going to get my pliers and I'm going to anchor off that wire, and I'm going to squeeze it in. So it's nice and tight and straight against that neck. I'm going to turn it around. Always get in your best working position. And I'm going to pull that wire down. Make sure you stay close to your neck so that you don't tweak your wire. And then I'm just going to push it out of the way. Now I'm going to add my other bead. Now I'm going to add my bead. So here's a tip. One of the things that you want to do is make sure that you're bending the wire. Do you see how there's a bend in the wire here where we initially made our bend to start our loop? And then as it goes around, it rounds out on this side, right? So it's always a little wonky. So I want to make sure that I bend this wire up here in the same direction of how I bent this one down here. So I'm going to straighten out that wire. I'm going to get my needle nose, and I'm going to bend this wire over the bead. Then I'm going to start my loop again, but I'm going to leave this loop open because I'm going to attach it to my bead. If I closed it, I wouldn't be able to attach it, and then you would use a jump ring. So I'm using the number 1 again. And then I'm rocking this wire over, but I'm kind of lifting up on it because I want to keep it open. And then I'm just going to roll my wrist. So I'm rolling my wrist towards my body to rock it down and line it up so that it's parallel. And I'll show you what I mean with this other loop. So they're parallel with each other like a little bow tie. So I left this open, and you can see the gap space in there so that I can make it easy on myself. I could also open up these legs, but I think I'm just going to do it this way this time. I do it different all the time, just depending on whatever I'm doing. And so now I've added in my bead. And now I'm going to close this off. Because it's swung open, I'm going to use my fingers and I'm just going to flatten it or push it together. And then I'm going to get my pliers and I'm going to flatten it. So now I've got both my wires coming up parallel to each other, and that's not super important. Now I'm going to do a little bit of each side so that the loops are equal on each side of this gap space, and then I'm going to continue with my design. So you want to hold really close to the neck and swing your wire up. And swing it around. Oh, my little guy's getting in the way here. I got to get him out of the way. Now here's another tip. When you're swinging your wire around, you're going to have a tendency to bend that tip. So before you start your next swing on that wire, just straighten out that tip and then come off the tip again and swing it around your neck. Now I have 2 full loops here, so I want to complete 2 full loops on this side, and if this wire is in the way over here, just move it out of your way. I'm going to straighten up that neck, and I'm grabbing at the tip of my wire back here, and I'm going to swing it over and around. Now, if you find that you end up with a little gap space here because I pulled off on an angle, all you're going to do is get your needle nose, and as before, if you can get in there, you're just going to line up these loops. Let me see if I have a thinner, because I kind of pushed this one off a little bit. If you can't do it from underneath, then put your plier on top and rock that loop down so that it's more flush with the bottom loop. So now I'm going to continue that rotation. And I really want that scooched up more. It's actually this right here. Okay. So now I'm going to start spiraling around this bead. So I'm just swinging my wire around, and I don't want to come on top of the wire. I want to come below it. So I'm just tracing that wire. Straighten out my tip. Start coming around again. And I'm going to stop right there. Now I'm going to work on this side. Start spiraling this wire around the bead. And I'm not pulling up and straight. I'm kind of pulling that wire down on an angle, just a very subtle angle, so that I can continue to trace around each loop I'm making on the bead. And then I'm going to come around the other side. And I'm going to stop now to see where my center is so that I know where I want to make my design. Now here's a really good tip. If you notice by me the way I was holding my loops, they're no longer parallel to each other. So here's what you do. You just grab 2 pairs of pliers and you just straighten them out. Just make them parallel to each other by rocking them back and forth. So one isn't off, and a little wonky. So that's my center. This is my front. So I'm going to obviously, well, you don't know that, obviously. I'm going to just change up the design as I go so you can see all the different ways that you want to wrap a bead. So now I'm on my front. So I'm going to take this wire here And let me get a different pair of pliers. And I'm going to bring it halfway over, and then I'm going to angle it over the front of the bead, and I'm going to swing it around the back. Keep losing my grip there. So I'm going to turn my bead over, and I'm going to bring this around. Just letting it ride up on the neck of those wires a little bit. Now on this one, let me get in the right working position. And I just tweaked my little loop again. So all I'm going to do is just straighten that out. I'm going to anchor off this wire. And I'm going to trace the one in the front over. So we got something like this. Isn't that pretty? So, sorry, you guys. So we got a double little wire wrap, kind of like a little scarf over the bead in the front like that. And now you can use your fingers at this point or not. I'm just going to do this to set myself up so that I continue to trace that wire. And then I'm going to bring my wire around. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm tracing the inside of the wire. So we've got our wire down here and our loose wire up here. And I'm just holding very firmly against the two wires as I'm pushing that around the neck. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect this little wire, this little end here. We're going to connect it inside the loop. So I've already got a nice curl on it, so that's an advantage. If you don't have a curl on your wire, curl it. Make sure you got a little loop. You want to hold firmly so you don't stretch out this cute little design we did up here. And then you want to start pushing that through as you're curling. So you're using your wrist, the tip of your pliers, and you're curling that wire in. So it starts feeding through this little loop here, your little eye loop, and then come around. And then right off the tip of it, you just want to push it down. Just squeeze that in. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to get our little dangly guy out of the way. And I'm going to set myself up to pre-curl that tip. And I'm going to push it through the loop, holding these two over here very firmly because I don't want to stretch them out. I'm going to start feeding that as I'm curling that wire through the loop. So it's coming out the other side now. And then right off that tip, I'm going to squeeze that wire down. I'm anchoring off the wire itself. And just hugging it into itself. So now we'll turn it around, make sure that our loops are squared up and didn't get a little wonky while we were doing all that work on them. And they look pretty straight to me. So there we have a really pretty focal bead. Isn't that pretty? So like on this one, I just did the spirals around the top. And on this one, I did a double wire scarf over the bead. And if you notice, this dangle is longer than this dangle. So that's what I meant by it's all about personal preference. So now we're just gonna add another bead and change the design. You could stop right here and these would be absolutely gorgeous earrings. You could take a silver bead, and let me show you an example. Just wanna constantly give you inspiration. You could take a little silver bead and put it right on top. So you could add this little bead in there. I don't know if you can see that. So it would look, this is not going to lay flat because of the roundness in this bead. So you could have your little silver bead sitting here on top, or you could use a big silver bead. If you really wanted to just give it some real fun, right here. Oops, it's going to want to roll away. So you see what I'm saying? It's just whatever you envision. Just let your imagination soar. Okay, so let's make our next bead. So again, we could stop here and this would be an adorable holiday earring. You could make green ones, beautiful royal blue ones, white clear crystal ones. You could mix all your stones. It's really endless. So as before, so that's 7.5 inches. Let me get down here, you guys. It's easier for me to actually see my numbers. Okay. So now we're just going to attach another bead and we're just going to change up the design. So I'm just going to come a little bit out from my mark. I'm going to make my little bend. So it's just a 90-degree angle, okay, or a corner square. Get my 6-step bail making pliers and make my loop. Same thing. And I kind of wonkied my wire there, but that's okay, I'll correct it. So I'm going to take my pliers out and I'm going to swing that wire around. And then to line up the loop with the neck, I'm going to rock that wire down and then straighten up my wire. And there's many different techniques on how to do this, so you find whatever works best for you, but I'm going to share with you what I do. There's no, like golden rule. I don't believe in boxing yourself in at all. Okay, so now let's start our loop. And I'm going to do 2 loops way out here where that wire is. So I'm grabbing the tip of the wire and then I'm going to swing it over, swing it down, and then I'm going to use my pliers to rock that in to the neck. Just swing it around. Then square it up with my neck. So I'm anchoring off the plier itself and on the bottom of the loop. And then I'm just going to swing it up. So here's another technique. You can continue to just do a halfway swing and then come in with your plier each time and anchor that wire down. And you'll see this wire here moving up. So let me show you that again. I'm going to swing this up like this. And then I'm just going to take my pliers and I'm going to anchor off that wire itself and just crimp it down. So you have a nice tight loop coming around the leg of your double loop that we're making here. So now as before, so as I mentioned, you want to bend in the same direction that this one was bent. So it's bent in the front here. So I'm going to get my pliers and I'm going to bend this and I want to make sure it's lined up and I'm not on an angle. So I want to really, what I'm doing is just basically twisting my wire there so I can keep it lined up, and I'm going to bend it over the stone. And then as before, I'm going to keep that an open loop. I'm going to use my number 1 and I'm going to come around. Now last time I went in the same direction, and what I mean is when I started making my loop, I brought it over the top. So each side, as I started to make the loop, I brought the long wire right here over the top. This time I'm going to push it under. I want it to be in the opposite direction. And then I'm just going to keep rolling and pulling my wire out to straighten it until it's parallel. Let me get my pliers out of here. So you have yourself this little funny bow tie. Now I'm going to open this up a little bit because I kind of cranked down on it. So I'm just going to come from this side. And I'm grabbing at the bottom of the loop and I'm just going to anchor it away from me. So I opened it up. And then I'm going to grab my piece and I'm just going to slide this through. This is just creating a permanent connection. So the bead itself can never fall out. It's permanently connected. I mean, you'd have to yank on this like no tomorrow or catch it seriously on something. Now, as before, I flatten this down. And then I'm going to square these guys up because they're kind of bending off on an angle. And I'm going to do 2 loops around the neck here. Coming around the back. Now, the reason why we did those as opposites, meaning when we were making the loop, I went over the top on one and I went underneath on the other, is because I wanted my wires to be coming out on the same side. I didn't want them to be in opposite directions. They can be, but there's a reason for me doing this. So it just gives you more ideas and techniques on, you know, what it is that you want to do and what you're creating and how you want your wires to end up. And I want both my wires to be coming out on the same side. I'm just straightening stuff up here. So now they both feel pretty tight and even. There isn't much gap left in there. So now I'm going to start to spiral and I'm going to get this wire over here out of my way. So I'm just going to angle it off. And I'm just going to start spiraling. And I'm always working on a very subtle angle because I don't want to ride up on top of the wires that I've already looped around. So I'm bringing it around. And I'm kind of pulling it down a little bit on the stone as I'm coming around each time. Going to get this wire over here out of my way. Lift that up so I can get up underneath it. So let me just stop here for a minute because I want to see where my front is because there's something that I want to do here. So, okay, this is my front. Look how pretty that is. Now you could stop here after you make this piece, put an ear hook in, or continue to make multiple beads, connecting them over and over and make yourself a beautiful bracelet. But anyways, I'm stopping here just to look at where my front is because I want to do something with this wire and I want to make sure I have enough length. So I'm going to come over here on this side and I'm going to grab very closely to my neck, straighten that tip out and start swinging it around. I got to get myself in a better working position. Now I rode over that wire a little bit in the back, so let me get this guy out of the way. I caught that as I was coming around. I saw that I was riding over it a little bit. I just want to see where my front is again. Okay, see how it's riding up a little bit? Do you see that? We're just going to push it down. Just want to make sure I have enough wire for what it is that I'm thinking about. So I'm going to continue to bring this one here around the front. Good. Like that. So I've got enough wire there to bring it around one more time and still create my decorative design. So I'm going to stop right up here because I'm on my front now. You got to watch where you're at so that you know that you're working wherever you're going to make your decoration and where you want your decoration to be. I want mine on the front. Well, I have enough here. I think so. They weren't perfectly centered. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to bring this wire around. Now, let me just see where my front is. Perfect. So I have both wires coming out on the same in the same direction, right? So they're both coming around the back. One's a little longer than the other, so I may have to do something different with this because as I'm looking at it, well, I might be able to still make a little swirl because I need that wire. Might be a little short. Gonna have to make a very tiny loop, or I could always wrap it down here. You always want to work with what you've got. So on this one, I'm going to bring it, let me get in a better working position. You find my front. Okay. That's my front. So I'm going to bring this wire around all the way to the front. And I'm going to anchor it down. And then I'm going to make a loop. And that ends a little gnarly. By the way, you guys, I'm using what's called a tarnish resistant wire. I never use this for sell. This is what I started with 4.5 years ago because I didn't know any better, and it was recommended by some of the people that I was following, and I found that I did not like it at all because if you dent or scratch this wire, you've taken off the coating and you cannot correct that. So for me, I'm not into tarnish resistant wire, but I'm using this for the tutorial because I didn't want to use sterling silver on crystal beads. I would never use sterling on crystal beads. I would only use it on natural gemstones. So now what I'm going to do is on the outside here, I'm going to make a loop. Let's see what direction I'm in. I'm going to make a little tiny loop. And I'm actually using my needle nose because I really want to control that loop there. Then I'm going to get my pliers in here again, right on that tip. I can't get them in there, and that loop's so small. So I'm going to use my very tiny, tiny tipped pliers. These are Italian, and they've got this little itty bitty tip. So they're great for, you know, getting in small spaces like that. So let me just check and see where I'm at, because I'm wanting to bring this loop to the front. It's a little fiddly. So now I'm going to turn my loop. It's facing down, and that's just because I wanted to get in a working position. So I'm going to turn it. Because I'm going to be swinging towards the front of this stone. So I'm just going to start rolling my loop in. And on tarnish resistant wire, you have to be really careful with how hard you squeeze. So I can already see that I'm making some significant little tiny marks in that wire. So I'm going to continue with my plier, and I'm going to move that out of my way. And I'm just going to start rolling this swirl up until it lines up with the center of my loop on the top of this bead. So I'm going to stop here and drop this down on the neck. Take a look at how this is lining up. Oops. Let me get my pliers so I can hold it and take a look at that. And I did it again. I'm just having the dropsies. So here's my front. So that looks pretty center to me. I'm going to bring this loop in just a little bit more. So I'm going to hold down really tight at the top. And as I said, it's a little fiddly. And I'm just going to bring this little baby loop closer to the curve in the outside of that swirl, just by curling it in a little bit more. And to me, that's a lot better, more aesthetically pleasing for my eye. Now this one is too short. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to cut it off on the back. You could also take this one and wrap it inside this loop and tie it off. So if you didn't want it cut off in the back, you could just snip it right here and leave it. It's not gonna hurt anything or go anywhere. You would take this wire, straighten it out, start curling the tip of it so that you can literally work it through your loop. And so now I'm just rolling it in. And it's barely coming out the other side again, so I'm holding very firmly where I've got my little spiral wrap on the top of this bead, because I don't want to stretch those out. And that can be tricky if you've never done this design technique before. And then right here on the tip, and I'm anchoring off the curve in the wire itself, I'm going to squeeze it in to itself. So now we have this very pretty, elegant design. So this would make a beautiful drop pendant with a gorgeous silver chain. As I mentioned, earrings. It's really kind of endless what you want to do. This, you could make a solid Christmas chain out of this. So you would just continue to be wrapping and connecting your beads together. And this would not be put on here yet. This would drop down in the middle. So for example, you've made your bead chain, right? And you're probably going to need about, God, a lot, 30 to 30 beads, I would think. So now when it's hanging off your neck, I would make this piece bigger. So this is going to be the focal point of where it's going to drop in the middle of the chain. I would definitely use a very large bead to have that drop there, and maybe drop some little silver beads on top of it and have this be a much bigger drop, and that would be the centerpiece. Or you could actually drop more from the middle. I hope that's making sense. So you've got all your beads, you've got your beaded chain, and in the center you could drop something like this. Hope that makes sense. So now let's do one more. We're just wrapping beads and changing up the style to make it very festive and Christmassy and holiday-y and all that. But isn't that pretty? So same thing as before. I've got my wire here. So I've just bent my leg up as before. I'm going to make a loop. Adjust my wrist, roll it over the top, and rock my loop down so that it's parallel with the leg. And this time, I'm just going to make a couple of loops. Just squaring that wire up. So I'm going to do 2. Let my pliers do the work for me. And then I'm going to add my bead. Need to straighten out that neck a little bit. Now you could drop in a little tiny 2mm silver bead in here before you put in your big bead. So you could drop a little tiny silver bead here, or you could drop 3, not have anything on top. It's whatever you envision. So I want to make sure that I bend my neck in the same direction, rolling it over the top of my stone. Then I'm going to leave it open. I'm going to rock it over the top, and I'm going to start rolling my wrist in to line it up so that it's parallel with the opposite loop. Now remember, you want to leave it open, give yourself a little bit of gap space. So I'm just going to lift up on this wire right at the bottom of the loop. Just lift it up a little bit. So just give myself some working room. And then I'm going to slide my bead in. So they're all interlocking. Then I'm going to come around here and I'm going to flatten this and press them together, because remember, I opened up that piece and made gap space. I want to make sure that it's nice and flat in there. Now on this one, I'm just going to do swirls around each side. I'm not going to do a double scarf. I'm not going to make a swirl in the middle, just to change it up so that it's super decorative. So I'm going to do my 2 wraps here. And the reason why I'm alternating back and forth, in case I didn't mention this, is I want to make sure that the loops are equal on each side. So if that makes any sense, I don't want it to be, if I kept looping, if I kept wrapping around this loop without trying to create balance on the other side, I could end up having 3 wraps here and 1 wrap there. And I personally want them to be equal. So that's why I only did the 2 loops, because I knew that I would have the gap space here so that I could line them up and make sure that they're equal on each side before I start my decorative, before I start decorating. So see how there's still a little wee bit of space in there? So they're going to be perfectly even when I bring this wire around to the top. And now they're equal on each side. So these are really great techniques that I think that will help you accelerate your journey in this magical, ancient art of wire. So now I'm just going to start spiraling around. I'm going to stay very close to my neck. And I'm going to start spiraling, oops, I'm out of frame there, around my bead. Straighten my tip out a little bit. And again, if you find this wire's in your way, just move it out of your way. You got to stay close to that neck. I need a thicker plier, so I'm going to switch pliers. Sometimes a very thin plier will continue to slide off. So you need to have a good grip. Now I'm going to start just wrapping around the bead and creating a beautiful spiral. Now I'm coming around and I want to make sure that I'm on my front so that I know how much wire I have to work with to tie this off. So this is my front, and I know that by the swirl design on this. So see how it's hanging? So we've got a horizontal and a vertical loop. So I'm going to bring it around. And I'm going to stop in the back. So I'm just going to switch sides and continue spiraling this side. coming around the back. And I know that because I gave myself a little clue where I ended this wire off. So let me take a look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this one around to the front. Sorry, you guys. And tie it off to this loop. And I'm going to tie this one off in the back. So I'm going to continue this. Straighten out my little end there to the front. And then I'm going to create a loop. And I'm going to wrap it through. So I'm looping that through the loop that's connecting. So my permanent connections here. You want to always get yourself in a really good working position. Never fight your wire. So let me see where I'm at, how this is going to sit. So that's going to sit like that. So I'm going to keep swinging that. That's a little long for me. So I'm going to cut it. And then right on the tip, anchoring off the wire itself, I'm going to start rolling it into itself. Look how pretty that is. Isn't that pretty? So now we're on the front and we're finishing off our beautiful little necklace dangle, or you can keep adding beads, whatever you want to do. Isn't that pretty? It's just so festive. I think these would make awesome earrings, matching bracelet and necklace when you show up for your holiday Christmas party, and everybody would be going, ooh, I want some of those. And that's your opportunity to sell them. So now I'm going to do as before. I'm going to straighten out my tip. I don't want my wire super wonky. And I'm going to roll it. So I'm making a curve in that wire. And I'm working off the tip. And I'm basically guiding it by working off that tip. Now I'm going to work off the loop a little bit, just to swing it around. I like this, just to give you an idea of what I'm looking at, I like the openness of it swinging around here. So I won't get that same effect in the back, but it will be that way. And then I'm just going to bring my little tip here around. And I'm going to keep curling it in. Give myself a little squeeze here, a little head start. I'm squeezing off that tip. And let's turn her around. So I did get that same effect a little bit. That's so cute. I really like that. So let me shrink this down so you can have a better view of just how darling this is. So I really hope you enjoyed that, everybody. Please, if you use my tutorial and post on your social media, I'd appreciate if you would just say design credit DDLynn Designs, or please attach my YouTube link so that others can learn how to make this as well. It's all about paying it forward and being grateful to all those that have gone before me. So I wish for all of you all that you wish for yourselves. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell so you know when my next tutorials are coming out next. And thank you so much for being a part of this magical, wonderful, ancient art of wire. Have a magical, wonderful day. Bye for now.